The crack of a rifle shot echoed through the hills as Fiona Campbell ducked behind the weathered porch pillar of her small homestead, heart pounding against her ribs like a wild Mustang. Montana Territory, 1875, a place where promises were as fragile as morning mist and just as likely to vanish with the rising sun. Angus Lowell had sworn he'd return by nightfall to help her defend the land claim her father had died protecting. But as darkness fell and the Blackwell gang closed in, Fiona faced the bitter truth that the man she'd trusted with her heart and her future wasn't coming. "You've got until first light, Miss Campbell," Silas Blackwell's gravelly voice carried across the moonlit yard. "Either sign over the deed or we burn everything to the ground." Fiona clutched her father's old shotgun, the metal cold against her trembling fingers. 22 years old and entirely alone, she'd spent her childhood in Boston's polite society before her father's dreams of silver brought them west. Now those dreams had gotten him killed, and the claim he'd discovered was attracting vultures. "I'll never sign," she shouted back, her voice steadier than she felt. "This land is mine by right." Laughter erupted from the darkness. "Then we'll see you at dawn, miss. Hope you've made your peace with God." Fiona swallowed hard, pushing back the bitter sting of tears. Angus had promised. They'd planned everything so carefully he would ride to Fort Benton for reinforcements while she held the claim. By nightfall, he'd sworn to return with help. Their future together had seemed so certain just 24 hours ago, his kiss still burning on her lips as he'd ridden away. As the night deepened, Fiona barricaded the door and windows of the small cabin. Her father's pocket watch ticked away the hours as she moved between lookout positions, fighting exhaustion. Midnight came and went. 2 o'clock. 4. Each passing hour deepened the hollow ache in her chest. He wasn't coming. The eastern sky began to lighten, pale fingers of dawn reaching across the Montana horizon. Fiona's eyes burned from exhaustion and unshed tears. She'd held out hope until the very end, but now reality settled over her like a shroud. Whatever had kept Angus away, cowardice, deception, or worse, she was on her own. The sound of horses approaching sent her scrambling for position. Through a crack in the shutters, she spotted Silas Blackwell and 5 of his men spreading out around the property. Her hands shook as she loaded the last of her cartridges. "Time's up, Miss Campbell," Blackwell called, his voice carrying across the yard as the first rays of sunlight crested the distant mountains. Fiona took a deep breath, preparing to face whatever came next. But before she could respond, another sound cut through the morning air, hoofbeats, fast and hard, approaching from the west. A lone rider appeared, silhouetted against the dawn sky. Tall in the saddle, moving with the easy grace of a man who'd spent his life on horseback. Not Angus, this man was broader across the shoulders, with a different way of riding. He wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, a duster flapping behind him as he rode straight toward the cabin, seemingly oblivious to the danger. "Mister, you're riding into trouble," Blackwell shouted, turning his horse. The stranger pulled his mount to a halt, dust billowing around him. His voice, when it came, was deep and steady as the mountains themselves. "The only trouble I see is 6 men threatening a woman on her own land." Blackwell's hand hovered near his pistol. "This ain't your concern, stranger. That's where you're wrong." The man dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing a worn gun belt and the distinctive star of a U.S. Marshal pinned to his vest. "Federal Marshal Adam Lawson, and I came for you, Blackwell. You and your boys are wanted for claim jumping in 3 territories." The blood drained from Blackwell's face. "This is a private matter. It stopped being private when you put a bullet in George Campbell and tried to steal his daughter's rightful claim." Marshal Lawson's hand rested casually near his holster. "Now, you boys can ride with me peacefully to Fort Benton to stand trial, or we can settle this another way. Your choice." Tension crackled in the air like lightning before a storm. Fiona held her breath, finger trembling on the trigger of her shotgun. Blackwell's eyes darted between his men, calculating odds. 5 against 1 seemed favorable, but something in the marshal's stance, the absolute stillness, the unwavering gaze, gave him pause. "You won't take us all, lawman," one of Blackwell's men growled, reaching for his pistol. What happened next unfolded so quickly Fiona could barely follow. Marshal Lawson's hand moved in a blur, his revolver clearing leather before the other man could fully draw. A single shot cracked across the yard and Blackwell's man collapsed, clutching his shoulder. "Anyone else?" Lawson asked quietly, his revolver steady. The fight drained from Blackwell and his remaining men. Within minutes, they were disarmed and bound together with rope from Lawson's saddlebags. Only when the last man was secured did Marshal Lawson turn toward the cabin. "Miss Campbell, Fiona Campbell, you can come out now. It's safe." Fiona emerged slowly, shotgun still clutched in her hands, disbelief and exhaustion rendering her speechless. The marshal's eyes widened slightly at her appearance, hair falling loose from its pins, dress smudged with dirt and gunpowder, dark circles beneath her eyes. "How do you know my name?" she finally managed. A shadow crossed his face. "I found Angus Lowell yesterday, 15 miles from here. Ambushed on the trail to Fort Benton." The world tilted beneath Fiona's feet. He's alive, but badly wounded. He told me about your situation before they took him to the doctor." Marshal Lawson removed his hat, revealing dark hair and eyes the color of a summer storm. "He asked me to come for you, said you'd be waiting. I rode through the night, but the trails are rough in the dark. I'm sorry I didn't make it before dawn." Fiona's legs gave way as relief and exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. The marshal moved with surprising speed, catching her before she hit the ground. "I waited all night," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I thought no one was coming." His arms were steady around her, his voice gentle but firm. "I came for you, Miss Campbell. I always keep my promises." In that moment, with the rising sun warming her face and the steady heartbeat of a stranger beneath her cheek, Fiona Campbell began to believe that perhaps not all promises in the West were made to be broken. Marshal Adam Lawson stayed at the Campbell homestead for 3 days, helping Fiona repair damage from Blackwell's earlier attacks and ensuring the claim was secure. He'd arranged for deputies to transport Blackwell and his gang to Fort Benton, promising Fiona they would stand trial for her father's murder and the attempt to steal her land. On the morning of the 4th day, Fiona found him saddling his horse before sunrise. "You're leaving," she said, not bothering to hide her disappointment. He tightened the cinch on his saddle, not meeting her eyes. "Got to report back and check on your friend Angus." "He's not my friend," Fiona said, the words surprising her even as they left her mouth. "Not anymore." Adam paused, finally turning to look at her. "He was wounded trying to get help for you, I know." Fiona wrapped her arms around herself against the morning chill. "And I'm grateful he sent you, but before he left..." She hesitated, memories washing over her. "He asked me to marry him if he returned with help, said we could develop this claim together." "And you agreed?" "I thought I did, but when I was waiting that night thinking he'd abandoned me..." She shook her head. "I realized I'd said yes because it seemed practical. 2 people have a better chance out here than 1 alone, but I don't love him." Adam's expression remained carefully neutral. "The West isn't kind to women alone, Miss Campbell, I'm aware." Her chin lifted slightly. "But I'd rather face it honestly than bind myself to a man for convenience." Something flickered in his eyes, respect, perhaps, or understanding. "What will you do?" "Keep working my father's claim. He believed there was silver here, and I intend to prove him right." She met his gaze directly. "I may be a Boston girl, but I'm learning fast." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I don't doubt that for a second, Miss Campbell." "Fiona," she corrected him. "After everything that's happened, I think we can dispense with formalities." "Fiona," he repeated, her name sounding different in his deep voice. "I'll be back this way in about 2 weeks, part of my regular patrol route." "I'll be here," she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. He mounted his horse with the easy grace she'd come to associate with him. "2 weeks, then. Try not to get into any gunfights while I'm gone." As she watched him ride away, Fiona felt something she hadn't experienced since arriving in Montana territory, not just safety or relief, but a flutter of anticipation for what might come next. True to his word, Marshal Adam Lawson returned exactly 2 weeks later. Fiona had spent the time productively clearing debris from the small mining operation her father had started, teaching herself to read his notes and maps, and reinforcing the cabin's defenses. She'd even managed to extract a small amount of silver ore, confirming her father's belief in the claim's value. When Adam rode up, she was outside splitting firewood, her sleeves rolled up and hair tied back with a simple ribbon. She felt his eyes on her before she saw him, and when she looked up, he was watching her with an expression that made her cheeks warm. "Productive 2 weeks?" he asked, dismounting. She rested the axe against the chopping block, brushing wood chips from her skirt. "Very. Would you like to see?" The genuine interest in his eyes as she showed him her progress surprised and pleased her. Unlike Angus, who had humored her questions about mining with patronizing explanations, Adam asked about her methods and listened to her reasoning with respect. Over dinner, a rabbit stew she'd prepared, he brought news from Fort Benton. "Blackwell and his men will stand trial next month," he told her. "With my testimony and yours, they'll hang for your father's murder." Fiona nodded, a weight lifting from her shoulders. "And Angus, recovering well." "He asked about you." Adam studied her face carefully. "Seemed to think you two had an understanding. I sent him a letter explaining otherwise." She met Adam's gaze steadily. "I thanked him for sending you, but made it clear I won't be marrying him." Something in Adam's expression shifted. "He didn't take it well." "No, I imagine he didn't." She poured them both more coffee. "But it was the honest thing to do." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Adam spoke again. "I've been reassigned." Fiona's heart sank. "Oh, they're moving me to the Montana-Idaho border. There's trouble with claim jumpers in the mining districts there." He turned his coffee cup in his hands. "It's a 6-month assignment, 6 months." The thought of not seeing him for so long left an unexpected hollow feeling in her chest. "When do you leave?" "End of the week." His eyes met hers. "Unless I have a reason to refuse the assignment." The implication hung in the air between them. Fiona set down her cup, heart suddenly racing. "What kind of reason would that be, Marshal Lawson?" "Adam," he corrected her softly. "And a compelling one, like someone needing protection here." "Is that all it would be?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Protection." He reached across the table, his calloused fingers brushing hers. "No, Fiona, that's not all." The touch of his hand sent a current through her more powerful than any she'd ever felt with Angus. In that moment, she recognized the difference between practical arrangement and genuine connection. "I can't ask you to give up your duty," she said. "You're not asking. I'm offering." His hand closed around hers. "I've spent 10 years chasing outlaws across 3 territories. Maybe it's time to put down roots. With a woman you barely know." The corner of his mouth lifted in that half-smile that had begun to feature in her dreams. "I know enough. I know you're brave and determined. I know you face challenges head-on instead of running from them. And I know that since the moment I rode up at dawn and saw you standing on that porch, something changed for me." Fiona's throat tightened with emotion. "I waited all night for a man who never came," she said softly. "And then you appeared with the sunrise." "I came for you," he repeated the words he'd said that first morning. "And I'd like to stay if you'll have me." Instead of answering with words, Fiona rose from her chair, circled the table, and placed her hand against his cheek. When their lips met, it felt not like the beginning of something, but like a recognition, as if some part of her had been waiting for him all along. By early winter, the Campbell homestead had transformed. With Adam's help and knowledge of construction, they expanded the cabin, adding a proper bedroom and reinforcing the walls against the harsh Montana weather. The small mining operation began to show real promise, yielding enough silver to justify hiring 2 reliable men from a nearby settlement to assist with the extraction. Their partnership flourished alongside the mine. Adam's experience as a lawman brought practical skills and connections throughout the territory, while Fiona's determination and quick intelligence earned her respect from the miners and merchants alike. Together, they created something neither could have built alone. One evening in late November, with snow falling softly outside the cabin windows, Fiona sat at the table recording the day's mining yields while Adam cleaned his revolver by the fire. The domesticity of the scene struck her suddenly. How naturally they had fallen into this life together, how right it felt. "I received a letter from Boston today," she said, setting down her pen. "My mother's sister wants me to return. Says it's unseemly for me to remain in the wilderness unchaperoned." Adam looked up, his expression carefully neutral. "And what did you tell her?" "Nothing yet." Fiona moved to sit beside him near the fire. "I've been thinking about it all day." "Do you miss it? Boston, I mean." "Parts of it," she admitted. "The libraries, the concerts, conversations about something besides weather and cattle prices." She smiled to soften the words. "But I don't miss feeling constrained by what's proper for a young woman." Adam set his revolver aside. "You could go back for a visit." "I'd understand. Would you come with me?" The question clearly surprised him. "To Boston? I'd be as out of place there as a wolf in a parlor." Fiona laughed, picturing her aunt's reaction to Adam's tall frame and weathered face in her pristine drawing room. "Perhaps. But I'd like them to meet the man I—" She hesitated, the words catching in her throat. Adam's eyes darkened. "The man you what, Fiona?" They had shared a bed for months now, their bodies learning each other's contours and desires in the darkness. They had faced danger together, worked side by side, built something meaningful. But neither had spoken the words that hung between them now. "The man I love," she finished, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart. Adam reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips. "I've loved you since that first morning," he confessed against her skin. "Since I saw you standing there with your father's shotgun, refusing to surrender what was yours. Why didn't you say anything? Wasn't sure a Boston-bred lady would want a life with someone like me." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I've got no education to speak of, no family name, nothing but these hands and what skills I've picked up along the way." Fiona leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his. "Those hands built us a home. Those skills kept us safe. Your honor and courage gave me something to believe in when I'd lost everything." She kissed him softly. "I don't want a gentleman from Boston. I want you." The next morning, Adam was gone before Fiona woke, which was unusual enough to cause her concern. He returned midday, his horse breathing hard from a fast ride, his expression unreadable. "Is everything all right?" she asked as he stomped snow from his boots at the door. "That depends." He removed his hat and coat, revealing formal attire beneath the best clothes he owned, which he typically reserved for court appearances. Fiona raised an eyebrow. "You're dressed for town. Did something happen?" "Nothing happened. Yet." He crossed to where she stood and, to her complete surprise, lowered himself to one knee. "Fiona Campbell, I've been riding since dawn to find something worthy of you." From his pocket, he withdrew a small wooden box hand-carved with intricate designs. Inside lay a ring, not a traditional diamond, but a band of silver inlaid with small, deep blue stones that caught the light like stars. "It's silver from your father's claim," he explained. "I took some to the silversmith in Fort Benton last month. The stones are sapphires from a creek bed about 20 miles north." His voice grew softer. "I know it's not what you might have had in Boston, but it's perfect," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "It's us." "I can't give you concerts or libraries," he continued, "but I can promise to build you a life where you're respected and cherished, where your strength is valued, not hidden away." He took a deep breath. "Fiona Campbell, will you marry me?" Instead of answering immediately, she knelt before him, bringing them eye to eye. "When I waited all night for Angus, I thought I was waiting for safety, for practicality." She cupped his face in her hands. "But now I understand I was really waiting for you, for this. For love that feels like freedom instead of compromise." His eyes searched hers, hope warring with uncertainty. "Is that a yes?" "Yes," she breathed against his lips. "Yes, Adam Lawson, I will marry you." They were wed 2 weeks later in the small church in Fort Benton, with snow falling thick outside the windows and only a handful of witnesses, the local judge, the doctor who had treated Angus, and a few of Adam's former colleagues from the marshal's office. Fiona wore a dress of deep green velvet that she'd ordered from St. Louis, while Adam wore his formal black suit, freshly pressed for the occasion. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, their voices steady as they exchanged vows. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Adam kissed her with a tenderness that belied his strength, his hands gentle as they framed her face. "Mrs. Lawson," he murmured against her lips, and Fiona felt the rightness of the name settle over her like a blessing. The winter of 1875-1876 proved to be one of the harshest in Montana Territory's history. Blizzards swept across the plains and mountains, isolating homesteads and settlements for weeks at a time. For Fiona and Adam, the forced seclusion was a gift time to learn the rhythms of marriage, to plan for the future, to build the foundation of their life together. By spring, when the snow finally retreated and the hills turned green with new growth, they had news to share. Fiona's pregnancy, confirmed by the doctor during their first trip to Fort Benton after the thaw, filled them both with a mixture of joy and trepidation. "A baby needs stability," Adam said as they rode home, his arm protective around her waist. "Maybe it's time to consider what comes next." "What do you mean?" Fiona asked, leaning back against his chest. "The mine is producing well, but it won't last forever, and this is rough country to raise a child." His voice was thoughtful. "I've been offered a position as sheriff in Helena. It would mean a proper house, schools nearby when the time comes." Fiona considered this, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "Would you be happy as a town sheriff after all your years ranging across the territory?" "I'd be happy wherever you and our child are," he answered simply. "But I admit the thought of coming home to you every night instead of weeks on the trail has its appeal." The decision wasn't made that day, or even that month. They weighed options, discussed possibilities, and ultimately agreed to visit Helena before committing to any change. The journey, made in early summer when Fiona's condition was still easily concealed beneath fuller skirts, proved illuminating. Helena in 1876 was a city in transformation. What had begun as a mining camp was evolving into something more permanent: brick buildings replacing wooden structures, proper streets laid out, businesses establishing themselves beyond the immediate needs of miners. There were women pushing baby carriages, children playing in yards, signs of civilization taking root amid the frontier wilderness. The position offered to Adam came with a modest but comfortable house on a quiet street, with room for a garden and even a small stable for their horses. The sheriff's office was well established, with deputies already in place and the worst lawlessness of earlier years subdued. "It's different from what I'm used to," Adam admitted as they toured the town. "Less tracking outlaws through mountain passes, more keeping order and settling disputes." "Is that a bad thing?" Fiona asked, noting how his eyes lingered on a father teaching his young son to ride a pony in a nearby paddock. "Not bad, just different." He squeezed her hand. "What about you? The claim is your father's legacy." Fiona looked around at the bustling town, then back at her husband. "My father wanted security for me. The claim was his way of providing that." She placed his hand over her stomach where their child grew. "But we've found a different kind of security, haven't we? One that doesn't depend on silver in the ground." In the end, the decision felt natural. They would sell the mining claim, already attracting interest from larger operations, and Adam would accept the sheriff's position. By late summer, with Fiona's pregnancy beginning to show, they moved into their new home in Helena. The transition brought challenges. Adam, accustomed to the freedom of the open territory, sometimes chafed at the politics and constraints of town life. Fiona, despite welcoming the conveniences of civilization, missed the wild beauty of their remote homestead. But they adapted together, finding balance between their pioneer spirits and the needs of their growing family. In November of 1876, as the first snows of winter began to fall on Helena, Fiona gave birth to a daughter. They named her Eleanor Grace Lawson, Eleanor for Fiona's mother, Grace for the blessing they found in each other. "She has your eyes," Fiona whispered as Adam held their daughter for the first time, his large hands cradling her tiny form with extraordinary gentleness. "And your determination," he replied with a smile, watching as the infant's small fist gripped his finger with surprising strength. "Poor child is going to be as stubborn as both of us combined." Fiona laughed softly, exhausted but radiant. "I wouldn't have it any other way." The years that followed brought both joy and hardship, as years tend to do. Adam's reputation as a fair but firm sheriff grew throughout the territory, while Fiona, once Eleanor was old enough, opened a small lending library in part of their home, bringing a piece of her Boston upbringing to the frontier, and creating a gathering place for the growing community of educated women in Helena. They had two more children: Thomas George Lawson, born in the spring of 1878, and Catherine Rose Lawson, arriving in the summer of 1881. Their home, expanded twice to accommodate their growing family, became known for its warmth and hospitality. Not all was easy. The winter of 1880 brought illness that nearly claimed Thomas, leaving him with a slight weakness in his lungs that would follow him through childhood. A fire in 1882 destroyed part of Helena's business district, including the sheriff's office, requiring months of rebuilding. And in 1884, news arrived that Angus Lowell had been killed in a dispute over a gold claim in Idaho, a loss that, despite their history, Fiona mourned for what might have been. Through it all, the foundation Adam and Fiona had built that winter after their marriage held strong. They faced each challenge as they had faced Blackwell and his gang together, with courage and determination. As their 10th anniversary approached in the fall of 1885, Adam surprised Fiona with news that he had purchased land outside Helena, not a remote homestead like their first home, but a proper ranch with good water and fertile soil, close enough to town for convenience but far enough for privacy. "Are we becoming ranchers now, Sheriff Lawson?" Fiona teased as he showed her the property, their 3 children racing ahead to explore. "Maybe," he said, his arm around her waist. "Or maybe it's just time for a little more sky above our heads. The children need room to grow, and you've been talking about wanting horses again." Fiona leaned into him, watching as Alina, now almost 9, helped her younger siblings climb a fallen log. "You've been sheriff for almost 10 years. Are you ready for a change?" "I've been thinking about it," he admitted. "The territory's different now, more settled. Less need for men like me." He looked down at her, the lines around his eyes deeper than when they'd met, silver threading through his dark hair. "What would you think if I stepped down? Raised horses, maybe took on some special assignments for the governor when needed. I'd think," she said carefully, "that I married a man who knows his own mind and heart. If this is what you want, I'm with you. It's not just about what I want." His eyes were serious. "This life we've built, it's been good, hasn't it? But I sometimes wonder if you miss the adventure of those early days." Fiona laughed, the sound carrying across the open land. "Adam Lawson, you think raising 3 children lacks adventure? Or building a library from nothing? Or standing beside the sheriff during everything from blizzards to bank robberies?" He smiled, acknowledging the truth in her words. "Fair point, but this would be a change for all of us." She turned to face him fully, her hands resting on his chest. At 32, Fiona had grown into her strength, the refined Boston girl transformed into a woman of the West without losing her fundamental essence. "I once waited all night for a man who never came," she reminded him softly. "And then you rode up at dawn and said you came for me." Everything that followed, every change, every challenge has been part of the adventure we started that morning. He pulled her closer, his kiss as tender as it had been on their wedding day. "So we do this. Start something new again, together," she agreed, sealing the promise with another kiss. They moved to the ranch the following spring, as wildflowers carpeted the Montana hills and new calves tottered in the pastures. Adam stepped down as sheriff, but his reputation ensured consulting work with territorial officials who valued his experience and judgment. Fiona maintained her connection to the lending library, riding into town twice weekly to oversee its operations, while embracing the new challenges of ranch life. The children thrived in the open spaces. Alina, thoughtful and observant like her father, developed a remarkable way with horses. Thomas, despite his delicate health, showed a brilliant mind for engineering, constantly designing improvements for the ranch's operations. Catherine, the youngest and most adventurous, could often be found exploring the creeks and hills, returning with fascinating specimens and wild stories. As Montana prepared for statehood in 1889, Fiona and Adam hosted a grand Independence Day celebration at the ranch, welcoming friends from Helena and surrounding homesteads. Lanterns hung from trees, tables groaned with food, and a small band played on the porch as couples danced in the yard. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the children were asleep, Adam found Fiona sitting on their porch, gazing at the stars. "Happy?" he asked, settling beside her. "Immensely." She rested her head against his shoulder, her hand finding his in the darkness. "Do you ever think about that night, when I waited and you came at dawn?" "Often." His thumb traced familiar patterns on her palm. "I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd arrived even an hour later." "I don't," Fiona said with quiet certainty. "Because somehow I think we would have found each other anyway. Different circumstances, perhaps, but the same ending." Adam brought her hand to his lips. Not an ending, he corrected gently. Just another beginning. They sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch horses nickering softly in the barn, the distant call of an owl, the whisper of wind through cottonwood leaves. Above them, stars wheeled in patterns as ancient as the land beneath their feet, while inside the house, their children dreamed of tomorrow. "I love you, Fiona Lawson," Adam said softly, the words as heartfelt now as they had been when first spoken beside a fire in a remote cabin. "And I love you," she replied, turning to kiss him beneath the vast Montana sky. "Always." In the years that followed, as their children grew and Montana evolved from territory to state, Adam and Fiona Lawson became pillars of their community, not just for their success as ranchers or their contributions to Helena's development, but for the example they set of partnership and resilience. Their story, which began with a night of waiting and a promise at dawn, became part of the rich tapestry of tales that defined the American West, a testament to the power of keeping one's word, of choosing love over convenience, and of building something enduring in a land where little was guaranteed. By the turn of the century, with Alina married and raising children of her own, Thomas studying engineering at a university back east, and Catherine working as a field assistant for a naturalist documenting Montana's wildlife, Adam and Fiona found themselves entering a new chapter. Their hair had silvered, their faces carried the lines of years lived fully, but the connection between them remained as vital as it had been that first morning. "You ever regret it?" Adam asked one evening as they sat on the same porch where they had watched so many sunsets. "Not returning to Boston, taking a different path than the one your family expected." Fiona, now approaching 50 but still carrying herself with the dignity and determination that had first caught his attention, considered the question seriously. "Not for a moment," she finally answered. The girl who waited that night thought she knew what she wanted: safety, propriety, a practical arrangement. But what I found instead was something far more valuable. She reached for his hand, the familiar weight of it comforting after all these years. "I found a partner who saw me as I truly was, who valued my strength instead of trying to contain it, who came for me when I needed him most and kept coming back, day after day, year after year." Adam lifted their joined hands, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "And I found a woman brave enough to build a life on her own terms, who showed me that duty and love aren't separate things but part of the same commitment." As twilight deepened around them, transforming the familiar landscape of their ranch into shadowed mystery, they remained on the porch, two figures silhouetted against the warm light from within. Their conversation drifted to practical matters: the next day's work, news from their children, plans for the coming season, but beneath these everyday concerns ran the current that had sustained them through decades of frontier life. The profound understanding that some waits, no matter how long or uncertain, are rewarded beyond all expectation. And when they finally rose to go inside, closing the door against the gathering night, it was with the quiet certainty of those who know that whatever dawn might bring, they would face it as they had faced every dawn since that first fateful morning together, their promise to each other renewed with each passing day. In a land where promises were often as fragile as morning mist, theirs had proven as enduring as the mountains themselves, a testament not just to the power of love, but to the courage required to claim it and the commitment needed to nurture it through all the seasons of a shared life.